Hello friends! I'm starting a new campaign right now, and it has me thinking about how starting a new campaign used to be kind of awkward. There was this steep roleplay curve at the beginning. Have you ever experienced that? Sometimes it took weeks or even months for a campaign to really feel like it was hitting its stride. Even one-shots wouldn't click until we were like a quarter of the way through, which feels so crappy when you have limited time. But that doesn't really happen to me anymore, and that's because I learned this one super simple trick, and now I use it for every single game. You know that moment when all the PCs are finally in the same room and everyone's described their characters and introduced themselves, and maybe you've even already fought something together, but now you're having that weird conversation where everybody is trying to find in-world reasons to team up while still being true to their characters. The players know that this is their adventuring party, but the characters usually don't yet. So how do you get past that new acquaintance awkwardness? Well, it's a pretty simple solution, actually. You're not new acquaintances. You already have relationships with these people before the events of the campaign. And that's it! Great video, folks. See you next week. No, I'm joking. I actually have a lot more to say. I want to show you why this works, how this works, why it's good for both players and GMs, and I want to share some examples of this trick in action, because this is more than just saying you've met before or slapping a label on a pair of characters. But first, while some of you are still in the middle of typing your well actuallys into the comments, let's address the fact that lots of tabletop role-playing games already have a mechanic like this built into the system. Fate Core's Phase Trio systematizes the act of incorporating the other players into your backstory, making sure that you've crossed paths with 2 other characters before the game starts. Critical Role's new game, Daggerheart, includes specific questions to connect you to other player characters, like, what do I do that annoys you? Or what made you realize that we were going to be such good friends? In Traveler, incorporating a connection with another character into your backstory actually benefits your stats. It gives you both an extra skill. And that's just a few of the many games that do stuff like this. In tabletop design spaces, it's often said that if something is important to a game, it'll be represented in the mechanics. The elephant in the room here, I think, is D&D, which has its roots in wargaming. Roots that are still very much present in where it chooses to focus its mechanics. But as D&D evolves and attracts a different type of audience with different goals, the mechanics don't necessarily change to match. I mean, D&D has bonds, part of a section of the character sheet that I suspect a huge number of players don't really use, but in my experience, these bonds are mostly formed with NPCs or organizations, rather than with your fellow players. Otherwise, D&D doesn't really have relationship mechanics. But I'm gonna let you in on a secret. You can just add one in. The tabletop police aren't gonna break down your door and say, I'm sorry ma'am, that's a Fate Core mechanic, you can't use that in D&D. We're gonna need to take you down to the station. If roleplay is important in your games, and for whatever reason you'd rather be playing D&D than playing Fate Core or Traveler or whatever, you can choose to build it into your D&D game. There is absolutely no reason not to steal a mechanic from another game that you think would serve your table. The way I do it is pretty simple. I just require that every player character have an existing connection to at least 2 other characters. This naturally results in a network of connections that crisscrosses the entire group. Now, players can work this out on their own, one-on-one, or we can develop those connections together during session 0. I find that this tactic is most effective when it's done alongside the process of character creation, rather than afterwards. If people come up with their entire backstory beforehand and then try to form connections, those connections have a tendency to be shallower. Less, he taught me how to fight as a knight of my father's court, and more, I tried to pickpocket him last week and he caught me. Of course, players can just do this, regardless of whether or not a game master requires it. It doesn't have to be codified into the game mechanics for one player to say to another one, hey, do you want to play a married couple in this game? In fact, you have probably played in at least one game where 2 players had a pre-existing relationship. And if you have, you might have witnessed in real time how beneficial this can be to roleplay. The obvious benefit is that these characters don't have to pretend to be complete strangers while simultaneously trying on a meta level to bring them closer together. But there's more than just familiarity to gain here. A relationship gives you an excuse to world build and develop your backstories together during gameplay. You could say something like, be careful, we don't want a repeat of what happened in the Sunrise Glade. What happened in the Sunrise Glade? You have now pitched the ball to the other player to start to answer that question. And as you improvise things like this at the table, or even work to develop them in between sessions, your relationships grow more complex and your roleplay gets deeper and more real. The bottom line is, even when your party is full of great roleplayers, it takes time for relationships to naturally develop during sessions. Most people play at most once a week, if that, and it's not uncommon to have entire sessions where characters are so focused on combat or NPC interactions that they barely engage with each other. In fact, if you have a session that's all combat, you could go an entire week in real life playing out a minute or two of game time. Not exactly a ton of time to get to know each other. Sometimes building character relationships from nothing can be really fun to play out, but other times everyone is just trying to speed run getting to the point where you can actually team up and play together. Now, there are some characters for whom it is completely natural to just glom onto the first people they meet. My gnome barbarian Penelope is like that. She met the party and was immediately like, "Wow, you guys are great, can I come with you?" And it made total sense for her. But for many characters, trust takes a little more time. That means that either you roleplay out of character in order to get the game rolling and justify teaming up, or you're forced to introduce obstacles to the game in order to stay in character. And who does it fall on to remove those obstacles? Your poor game master, who, let's be honest, has enough on their plate. Actually, I have kind of a hot take here. We talk a lot in the tabletop gaming space about lone wolf characters and how unfair it is to your table to create a character who doesn't want to collaborate. But I actually think having pre-existing relationships between characters makes it easier to play an antagonistic or difficult character without disrupting the game. Hear me out for a second. Let's say that you play an edgy loner who doesn't want to rely on anyone else, but their sister is in the party too, and they've vowed to protect her. No matter how much they sulk and refuse to open up, they have to stay on board as long as their sister does. It creates an avenue to play that type of character, if that's appealing to you, without that character choice distancing you from the party and creating trouble for your GM. Also, this might sound obvious, but there are some relationships that can only be formed before the game starts. You don't generally become someone's sibling organically over the course of an adventure. I mean, in tabletop games, you never really know, but it's certainly not common. Now, I mentioned in the intro that a relationship is more than just a label slapped on two characters, and I really want to emphasize this. You can say me and this other character are brothers, but that doesn't define your relationship. There are a lot of different ways to be brothers. Is your brother your closest friend, the person who knows you best and would sacrifice anything for you? Or is he your rival, the golden child, your parents' favorite that you're always trying to measure up to? Is he your kid brother that you feel the need to protect and guide? Or is he the older brother that you look up to? Every relationship has shades like this, and identifying at least the general shape of your relationship is really important to how you roleplay it. Just saying we're brothers isn't enough to function as a foundation for good roleplay.
Dear Karlach, hey soldier. It's been a while since my last playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3, and I miss you. I need to see you again. Thankfully, I just learned about Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms. It's a Dungeons & Dragons strategy management game. I hear that it brings together characters from throughout the D&D multiverse into one grand adventure. They say I can unlock characters from novels, campaign adventures, actual plays, board games, and of course, Baldur's Gate 3. I found this code, Ginny Get Gold. If I use it, I can unlock you, Karlach, and our adventures don't have to end. Plus, I'll get 3 gold chests with all your gear. It's perfect. I'm going to rebrand.ly/ICGinny and downloading the game right now. It's free to play and it's available pretty much everywhere. Steam, consoles, even my phone. We can be together all the time. I can't wait. XOXO, Ginny.
See you soon, Karlach.
Babe, are you coming to bed?
Yeah, be right there.
Are you writing love letters to Karlach again?
No, I'm committing tax fraud. Okay, Game Masters, I'm talking to you now. Players can choose to form relationships with each other, but you can also make this kind of relationship building happen. There's some debate over whose responsibility it is to get players to team up. Is it the player's job to create characters that have a reason to form and stick with a party? Is it the Game Master's job to provide a circumstance that brings the party together? I kind of think it's a little of both. Like most parts of tabletop games, it's a collaborative thing. But asking players to develop pre-existing relationships with other characters lightens that workload for everyone. Players have more options for why their character is committed to the group, and GMs don't have to work as hard to force everyone into a situation where they must work together. I find this especially useful for one-shots when you really don't have time to waste on everyone deciding to team up for a quest or building new relationships in real time. I don't know about you, but I enjoy role-playing in one-shots, and there just isn't much variety if every single one-shot is a bunch of strangers teaming up for the first time. Now, I mentioned before that players can and do choose to form pre-existing relationships on their own without Game Master guidance, but that can also sometimes lead to an uneven balance of relationships at the table. It could result in some players and some relationships naturally taking up more space because they're more developed. And if the majority of the players are in these pre-existing relationships, it can make the ones who aren't feel kind of left out. That's why I think implementing a mechanic like this for the entire group is helpful. It ensures that the entire party has a sense of cohesion, not just a few players, and it makes sure that all the players feel like their character is important and connected to their fellows. I also think this can be a really helpful tool in balancing shy and outgoing players. In my video about how to not be a selfish role player, I talk about how valuable it can be for a more talkative player to actively invite a quieter player into a scene and make space for them. By linking those two types of players with a close character relationship, you're basically building a buddy system for roleplay. You're giving that more outgoing player a consistent, repeatable reason to invite that shy player to speak up and get involved. You can see the same kind of effect when roleplaying with strangers, say at a game at a convention or a first-time game with a new group that's outside of your normal social circle. Pretending to be strangers with actual strangers can be doubly uncomfortable and very vulnerable. You're basically playing pretend with someone that you just met, but having an existing character relationship with that person can help you get to know each other and get comfortable role-playing with each other much faster. I recently played in a Daggerheart one-shot with an acquaintance, someone I only barely knew. We decided to play sisters, and it enabled us to play off of each other and come up with fun, character-driven moments, even though we had only exchanged maybe a few sentences before that game. The other people at the table were strangers too, but somehow it felt comfortable and reassuring to have a sister in that group of strangers, even though the player behind the sister was also basically a stranger. When I ran my campaign for D&D in a castle last year, I knew that my players were most likely not going to know each other in real life beforehand. We were about to play 24 hours of D&D together, and even though that might sound like a long time, it was all going to be crammed into just 3 days, which means if it took a day or two for the players to get comfortable role-playing with each other, the game would practically already be over. So I asked that every player establish in-character relationships to other players before we arrived. And let me tell you, you would be shocked by how fast this group was acting like a party. Even the more reserved players had a clear path into the roleplay. Over the course of those 3 days, there were character interactions and roleplay moments that were deeper and more emotional than some multi-year campaigns I've played in. Now, I'm all about examples because we can talk about something in theory until we're blue in the face, but that doesn't always show us how it works in practice. So let's talk through an example D&D party. We'll use my characters to make it easy. For this game, let's imagine that we have Wisteria the Gnome Wizard, Clover the Halfling Bard, Necrasha the Half-Orc Barbarian, and Nimwin the Elf Cleric. Taking these characters as is, they would not make a good adventuring party. Wisteria is privileged and unused to real consequences, which her wealthy family has always shielded her from. Clover is cowardly and selfish, always willing to make somebody else's life worse to save her own skin or just get attention. Necrasha sees violence as the obvious answer to every question and will do anything for coin. And Nimwin is a necromancer disguised as a knowledge cleric who would prioritize the dead poet that she's obsessed with resurrecting over literally anyone else. Side note, this is why they're NPCs and not player characters. But now let's try creating relationships between them. Like maybe Wisteria's parents have hired Necrasha to be their daughter's bodyguard. As long as Necrasha sticks with the party and keeps Wisteria safe, she gets a regular paycheck. Suddenly, she is incentivized to stay, and so is Wisteria, who wants to be safe. In trying to track down more information about her long-dead poet, Nimwin finds Clover, who literally speaks in rhyme. She enlists Clover's help to decipher the deeper meaning of the poems. Not only does this make her indispensable to Nimwin, but it also makes Clover, who is desperate for approval and recognition, feel important and valued. Now we'll tie Necrasha and Nimwin together. Let's say both of them have done dirty work for a certain dangerous smuggler boss. Necrasha because she has no qualms about doing dirty work if it pays well, and Nimwin because she needed access to black market resources for her back alley necromancy. Unfortunately, this means that the smuggler boss has dirt on both of them, and sometimes sends them jobs that they can't really say no to, unless they're ready to start beef with an entire criminal organization. This means they're keeping a shared secret, which gives them power over each other. Wouldn't you want to keep somebody like that close? To link Clover and Wisteria, maybe they met in a tavern when Wisteria first got kicked out of wizard school, and Clover, upon learning that Wisteria is heir to her family's fortune, immediately decided to get in her good graces. She wrote Wisteria a poem, talking up her magical prowess and her charm and her beauty, and Wisteria, who loves being flattered, immediately decided that Clover was her best best friend. We don't have to keep going. I don't think every character needs to have a relationship with every other character, but there's nothing stopping us if we wanted to. For example, one of the many times Clover was imprisoned for petty crimes, Necrasha was her prison guard, and they really hit it off. And maybe Nimwin, who literally works at a library, was hired at one point to tutor Wisteria when she was failing her classes. She might even still feel like it's her personal responsibility to teach Wisteria magic. Obviously, this would be a table with a lot of conflict, but that might be fun, and in this case, because of all the connections, that conflict could play out without risking breaking up the party. As you can see, the possibilities for relationships are practically endless. Mentor and student, co-workers, boss and employee, academic peers, friends or rivals, family relations, lovers, spouses, exes, do a prisoner and their parole officer, a knight and their squire, a noble and their bodyguard. I once played an automaton who was built by another player at the table. The only limit is your imagination. I am straight up addicted to this little trick now. It's just a small thing, but it makes a huge difference in how quickly a game starts being fun. Even when I'm a player in a game where the GM hasn't asked us to form relationships, I'm always desperate for it now. I'm like, does anybody want to play my boss? Does anybody want to play the healer who saved my life? Have you tried this in your games? Let me know in the comments. I want to know about all the ways that you have tied your characters together with the other party members before the game even starts.